Maria had always believed Christmas was meant to be shared, warm laughter echoing across tiny rooms, the smell of cookies baking, lights twinkling like promises. But for the past 3 years, ever since her mother passed away and her younger brother moved abroad for work, the holiday had become nothing more than a cold date on a calendar, a reminder of the empty spaces in her life. So that evening, as snow tapped rhythmically on the cracked window of her small, dimly lit apartment, she folded laundry from the enormous mansion where she worked as a live-in maid and tried to convince herself that loneliness was something she could simply grow used to, though the silence wrapped around her shoulders like a heavy, unwelcome blanket. She had spent the entire day cleaning the sprawling estate of Alexander Hale, one of the city's most respected and wealthiest entrepreneurs, known for his stern demeanor, razor-sharp focus, and the air of isolation he carried as if it were part of his tailored suits. While his family prepared to leave for their annual luxury holiday trip, Maria had watched them rush through the mansion, children buzzing with excitement, his ex-wife shouting instructions over the phone, house staff scurrying to load luggage into sleek black cars, and Alexander himself walking briskly and speaking in clipped sentences, clearly preoccupied with business matters even on Christmas Eve. No one noticed her there except for Alexander's youngest daughter, little Lily, who had tugged softly on Maria's sleeve earlier that afternoon and said, "I wish you could come with us," to which Maria forced a smile and replied that some people just have to work on holidays, though the words stung in her throat. And as the mansion emptied, leaving behind only the faint scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree, Maria felt that familiar ache return to her chest. After finishing her tasks, she returned to her apartment, an old, weather-beaten building with peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves, and warmed a simple bowl of soup, trying to drown the silence with the soft hum of an ancient radio. She didn't put up a tree this year, she couldn't bring herself to. Instead, she sat near the window with her hands wrapped around her mug, watching families outside hurry past with bags of gifts, laughter trailing behind them like glittering ribbons, and she whispered into the quiet, "Maybe next year won't feel so heavy," though she didn't quite believe it. The wind howled outside, rattling her door, and she wondered what the Hale family was doing at that moment, perhaps boarding their private plane, sipping hot chocolate in first class, heading toward luxury and warmth, while she sat alone, clutching the edges of her worn blanket like the last piece of comfort she had left. What she didn't know was that miles away, in the back seat of his sleek car parked on the runway, Alexander Hale was staring out the window with a troubled look, replaying the brief moment when he'd walked past Maria in the mansion that afternoon. He had noticed something in her eyes, something he hadn't seen before: resignation, sadness, a quiet kind of pain. And though he had learned to ignore most emotional cues in his relentless pursuit of business success, that look lingered with him long after his children boarded the plane with his ex-wife. He remembered overhearing Lily ask why Maria didn't have a family to spend Christmas with, and remembered hearing himself say dismissively, "I'm sure she has plans," even though he had absolutely no idea. Now, as he sat alone, the engines humming with the promise of holiday escape, something gnawed at him, a strange sense of wrongness, of imbalance, of something left unfinished. It wasn't guilt, he told himself, but responsibility. She worked tirelessly, quietly, loyally. She made his chaotic household function. She cared for Lily with a tenderness that no amount of money could buy. He had meant to give her a holiday bonus earlier, but meetings and stress had pushed it out of his mind. And now he couldn't shake the image of her walking alone through the back gate as snow fell around her worn coat. Without thinking much more, Alexander abruptly stood from his seat, startling a flight attendant, and muttered that there was something he needed to do first. He stepped off the plane, ignoring the confused stares, and called his driver to fetch a gift basket, some holiday treats, and a bottle of wine, anything that felt like a gesture of appreciation. He wasn't a man accustomed to emotional decisions, but something told him that this night, of all nights, should not pass without doing what he had left undone. Meanwhile, Maria washed her bowl, wiped the tiny counter, and turned off the lights, ready to crawl into bed early just to make the night pass faster, when a sudden knock at her door made her jump. Nobody visited her, especially not at night, and the sound filled her with a mix of fear and curiosity. Pulling her thin cardigan tighter around herself, she approached the door slowly and peeked through the crack, only to freeze in shock. Standing in the dim hallway was her boss, Alexander Hale himself, dressed in a sharp, navy suit dusted with snowflakes, holding a massive Christmas gift basket wrapped beautifully with ribbons and bows. She blinked, sure her exhaustion had conjured him as some kind of strange holiday hallucination, but he cleared his throat with a soft, awkward smile, proving he was real. "Maria," he began, his voice unusually gentle, "I know this is unexpected, but may I come in for a moment?" Her mouth opened but no words came out. She could barely comprehend what she was seeing, the most powerful, strict, an emotionally distant man she knew standing outside her broken doorway with a basket that looked too extravagant to belong in her worn-out hallway. She stepped aside numbly, letting him in as a swirl of icy wind followed him inside. He glanced around her small apartment and felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Was it sorrow? Empathy? Regret, when he noticed how empty and quiet everything seemed? She finally managed, "Sir, why are you here?" But her voice was small, confused, almost fragile. Alexander set the basket gently on her tiny dining table, the polished wood of the handle looking strangely out of place next to her chipped plates and hand-stitched tablecloth. Then he turned to her with a sigh that held years of unspoken thoughts. "Because," he said carefully, "no one should spend Christmas alone. Especially someone who has given so much without ever asking for anything in return." Maria felt her breath hitch as warmth rushed to her eyes. No one had ever said something like that to her, certainly not someone like him. He reached into his coat and handed her a small white envelope. "Your holiday bonus," he explained, "which I should have given you earlier, but more importantly, I wanted to make sure you knew that your presence in my home, in my children's lives, is appreciated far more than you think." Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "I don't know what to say, sir." He shook his head. "You don't need to say anything tonight. Just accept that you matter. And that kindness should be returned." For the first time that evening, Maria felt the crushing weight of loneliness lift from her chest, replaced with something warm, recognition, gratitude, and the strange but comforting sense that maybe she wasn't as invisible as she always believed. As Alexander stepped back toward the door, preparing to return to his family's trip, he hesitated and added softly, "Merry Christmas, Maria. And thank you for everything." She watched him leave, the basket glowing softly under her small lamp like a symbol of unexpected grace, and for the first time in years, she whispered back into the quiet, "Merry Christmas." But this time, the silence felt gentle, no longer a reminder of what she lacked, but of a moment she would never forget. And little did she know, this Christmas was only the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever.